Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to go through an activity from the Object-Oriented Programming Basics reading. So if I click into that reading from the website and I scroll down into the optional activities section, I'm going to go through activity 1, which is to create a class named Pokemon that has the number, name, and combat points instance variables. It's going to need a constructor, and then it's also going to need a get name, get number, get combat points, and a set combat points method. And then we're just going to need to write a program that actually uses all of this functionality. So to start off, I'm going to open up idle. And I'm going to make a new file. And so I need to create a Pokemon class. So the syntax to do that, I use the class keyword and then I use the name of my class, which is going to be Pokemon. And so my constructor in Python is always going to use the init magic method, which is going to be called when I create a new Pokemon object. And let's just look back, and we see that we are going to need to have a number, a name, and a combat points as our instance variables. And so let's just take in values as parameters into our constructor so that we can set, I need a number instance variable, and that's just going to be the number that I passed in. I also need a name, and that's just the name that's passed in. And I need combat points, which is just going to be the combat points that was passed in. So, for example, if I say I make a Pokemon 1, it's going to be a Pokemon, and it's going to take in number, it's going to be number 4. It's going to have the name Pikachu, and it's going to have 40 combat points. I don't know if that's a reasonable number of combat points, but it'll be a good test. And let's see if we can run this without errors. In order to run, we're going to need to save our file. We'll call it Pokemon, maybe lowercase, Pokemon.py. And so let's see if this runs. See if we made any errors. And so we don't get any errors when we run it. But maybe a good thing to do, just to make sure that it's working, this wasn't part of the assignment, but another magic method is the string method. We'll say method to convert object to string. And so in Python, I can use this underscore underscore str underscore underscore, and this will tell the object what the string representation of the object is. So for example, if I want to, when I call print Pokemon 1, it would be nice if something like, maybe we got an output like name Pikachu, number 4, combat points, maybe we'll say CP 40, right? That would be really nice to see, because before we implement this, actually, I'll just put a comment here. Before we implement this, if we run it, we get actually what kind of object is it? Well, it's an instance of the Pokemon class. And we actually get a memory location. This is telling us where on the computer the data for this instance is stored. And so this isn't super helpful to tell us that we successfully implemented our Pokemon object, right? So it'd be nice if when we printed, we actually got some useful information. And so how we can do that is if we include this __str method, this will allow us to have some useful printing functionality. So what this string method needs to do is it needs to return the string that I want to show up when I call print. So I said I want it to look like name, colon, and then using the string format method, I'm going to have this as my placeholder, number, colon, a second placeholder, and then CP, colon, and a third placeholder. And now if I call .format and I pass in, what do I want that first thing to be? Self.name. I want that second placeholder to be self.number, and I want the third placeholder to be self.combat points. And I need to, oh, I only need one there. So now I think that this string method will print how I would like my object to print. But let's run it and take a look. And yeah, so it looks like we successfully assigned this Pokemon's name to be Pikachu, its number to be 4, and its combat points to be 40. So now let's see what else we need to do for this activity. So we need methods named getName, getNumber, and getCombat points. So these are often called getter methods, logically, because they get the data about this object. And so getter methods need to return the data that they sort of claim to be getting, right? So I said get name was one of these. It doesn't need to take any parameters, but it always has to take the self parameter. And it needs to return the name, right? And that's just self.name. We also need get number, right? And in just the same way, we return self.number. And finally, we have get combat points, and that should return self.combat points. And now let's just go ahead and test these out. Maybe I'll print, even though we have a way of printing these out just to test the getter methods, because they could be useful in a larger program that uses this Pokemon class. I probably want some way to get the name of a Pokemon object instead of just printing it out. So I'll say name is, and then I'll say, how do I call this method? I say Pokemon1, and then I use the dot notation. I call the method getName, and it doesn't take in any parameters. And I can do the same thing. Number is Pokemon1.getNumber, just using the same syntax as before. And finally, combat points is and I'll say Pokemon1 dot get combat points. And now I should, after I print out this format, I should print out 3 lines. Name is, number is, combat points is, with the correct values for each. And name is Pikachu, number is 4, and combat points is 40. So it looks like my getter methods are working. Now, the last one is set combat points. And these are also, this is a method that fits into the category of, we call these setter methods because they set values. And so, which one? Set combat points. And here, the idea is that although we initialize our object with combat points of 40, maybe we are going to need to update it later. Maybe our Pokemon levels up and its combat points increase, and so I'll say new combat points. And what should this method do? Well, it doesn't need to return anything. All it needs to do is set combat points, so the combat points that will stick around with this instance of the Pokemon class, to whatever the new combat points that got passed in were. So I'll go ahead and run this and make sure that it runs, and then maybe let's call our set combat points method. So I'm going to say Pokemon dot set combat points, and this needs to take in the new combat points. Maybe I'll say 50. And now I'm going to say print combat points is, and now I'm going to call my get combat points method again, because that's how I can see what the current combat points value is. And so I expect that the first time I call it, it should be 40, right? But the second time I call it, it should be 50, because I changed that value. Here's my comment. Okay, 50. So now let's run this and let's see if our program is working. Oh, Pokemon is not defined. Aha, I tried to call my method on the wrong variable name, so let's go ahead and run this. And just like we expected, combat points is 40, but then we update it to 50, and that looks like it's working. Let's write a program that utilizes the functionality of the Pokemon class in its entirety. Looks like we're calling all of our methods, and so we have satisfied that request of this activity, and so I would say we have successfully completed activity 1. If you have any questions about this activity or object-oriented programming in general, post on the Slack. All right, thanks everybody.